Okay. Now it works. Okay, hello Barcelona. This talk is about challenges and decisions, about options, pleasant options and not so pleasant options. Sometimes we are forced to abandon our desired plan and change to plan B, plan C, or even plan D. So this is the story about a rocky road we took to a plan D option when we had to move an entire vSAN cluster under full load to a new vCenter server instance. Now, why on earth would you want to do this? Are we crazy? Are we danger seekers? No, it usually starts with a phone call. The customer called and said, could you please have a look at our vSAN cluster? We have some issues. And I did a deep inspection of the cluster, and I came to the conclusion, if it was a horse, we'd have to shoot it. And I will explain you why. I found a 5-node cluster on vSAN 6.7. We had massive capacity problems. We had over-provisioned data store. We had unclaimed devices. We had HCL issues. We had problems in the network. We had problems in the virtual network. For example, we had vSAN kernel ports spread over standard switches and distributed switches. Needless to say, we had a lot of performance issues, and the worst thing of all was the vCenter UI. The vCenter UI was half broken. That means all related to vSphere worked well. So you could deploy virtual machines, start, stop, but everything related to vSAN was broken. So before we could tackle the vCenter problem, we had to do some housekeeping. We had to fix the physical network, we had to fix the kernel ports, we had to fix capacity issues and disk issues, and then we could address the main problem, the half-broken vCenter server appliance. After some short repair efforts, I found out this thing is beyond repair. So the best thing we can do is shut down the whole cluster, make one final backup, and rebuild from scratch. So I asked the customer, what is the next maintenance window? And he said, oh, it's at least 8 months in the future, and we cannot afford a single minute of downtime, because this cluster belongs to Kritis. Well, what is Kritis? Kritis in Germany is everything that is related to critical infrastructure. That means energy supply, water supply, healthcare, government, finance, transport, communication. Long story short, everything that would affect the German public in a negative way. So it was clear, shutting down the cluster is not an option. So there goes our plan A. What else can we do? Well, I thought maybe we can try an upgrade of vCenter. If you upgrade vCenter, you will get a brand new vCenter server appliance. And hopefully, all the problems will disappear. In a parallel universe, this worked well, but not in this world. It was like the Greek Hydra. You chop off one head and 2 new ones regrow. We solved one problem and got a bunch of new ones. So we realized, no, we cannot upgrade. It doesn't work. What else can we do? What about building another cluster with a fresh vCenter? The customer was willing to buy some additional hardware of the same kind, so we can build another cluster, a new vCenter, and then make use of advanced cross vCenter vMotion. Move the workloads to the new vCenter instance, have no downtime, and everything would be good. The problem is, Advanced cross vCenter vMotion requires vSphere 7 update 1C on the source side. We've been on 6.7. Better luck next time. So brilliant plan, but it doesn't work here. But wait a minute. What about the Fling? Before this became a feature in vCenter, there was the Fling project. And it was possible to use this Fling with older versions of vCenter. For example, 6.5, 6.7. Could we use this Fling project? It still exists. That's a recent screenshot. And you can see it's productized. It's currently went into vCenter as a feature. The point is 3 letters. TNS. Totally not supported. It's not supported for production. And remember, it's critical infrastructure, so we cannot do this. I knew from the beginning there's another way to do it. There's a possibility to migrate a vSAN-Cluster without interruption from one vCenter instance to another vCenter instance. I wasn't happy with the idea. Trust me, I rather had my toenails pulled without anesthesia than doing this. But it was a last resort. We checked all other options, so we had to think about it. Take it into consideration about migrating the whole cluster. Yeah, sounds funny, isn't funny, because the whole process has some points of no return. So once you start, you have to succeed, and you have a fair chance of wrecking your cluster. So you can imagine I wasn't happy. But anyway, stop whining. We had to do it, and what are the sources we can use to find out how it works? First, there is an official knowledge base article, because this method is supported by VMware. It's fully supported, even in production. That's a good thing. But after reading this knowledge base article, which is very long and very detailed, I was like, no way, I will not do this. This is too dangerous. There's a high risk of failing. And we were short of before abandoning the idea, but then I read another article. It was written by William Lamb in 2014. Now keep in mind, 2014 was the release date of vSAN, and he wrote an article how to do this procedure. And William kept updating his blog post over the years and kept it recent. And after reading his article, I was like, okay, maybe we can do this. I became a bit more confident. Now, before we go into details, I will explain how it works and why it works. A vSAN cluster is a robust thing. You need a vCenter to build a vSAN cluster. You need a vCenter to configure a vSAN cluster and to monitor a vSAN cluster. But once it's up and running, you can literally shut down the vCenter appliance and your cluster will be fine. So in theory, we could disconnect a host from the old cluster, remove it from inventory, and connect it to a new vCenter server instance. In theory. But there's a catch. And the catch is called cluster member list updates. Each vSAN host has a list of all other hosts in the cluster and how to reach them. And vCenter keeps updating this list. Whenever something happens to the cluster, a new host is added or a host is removed, vCenter will notify all hosts that number 2 has left the party, and the hosts will stop communicating with that host. So under any circumstance, we have to block this. This will spoil the party. But we are lucky, there's an advanced feature. It's called ignore cluster member list updates. So basically what we are doing is we're telling each host, whatever vCenter is telling you, don't believe it, it's a liar. It's an advanced feature, you have to activate it on each host in the cluster, or if you're a Power CLI fan, you can use this Power CLI one-liner. I love one-liners. And the hosts will ignore cluster member list updates. Now, before we can start, we have to do some proper planning. It's dangerous. It's not just skip, skip, finish. You have to plan it. First, read the knowledge base article. It's long. Read it from beginning to the end. Make notes. Make a detailed plan. What is the first step, the second, the third, and so on. Read William's post. It's valuable. It helped me a lot because it simplifies the process. And then make sure your vSAN cluster is clean. If you check this, make sure it is really clean. Now, how can we check if the vSAN cluster is clean when the UI is broken? ESX CLI is your friend. Choose a random host from the cluster, SSH, type ESX CLI vSAN health cluster list, and it will do a lot of checks. Now you can see all these checks are green here. Trust me, in the beginning we had a lot of yellow and red checks in the cluster. This is after we did the housekeeping and the basic repairs. The most important one is this one, overall health, green, okay. This is a thumbs up, you're good to go. If not, fix the problem, come back again. And you need to make sure that there are no resync activities between your vSAN objects. And you can check it too with ESX CLI. ESX CLI vSAN debug resync summary get. And you will get something like this. What you want to see is a big number in the first line. That's the total number of your objects, and that's the number of healthy objects. And make sure all other lines have zeros. If that is the case, it's a thumbs up. You're good to go. Okay, we prepared the source side. Now it's time to prepare the target side. We have to deploy a brand new vCenter server appliance. We have to build an empty vSAN cluster because we don't have any hosts. Export and import your VDS settings. Export it from the old cluster, import it a new one. That's fine. And export and import your storage policies if you have any special policies. It's good to have them on the target side. And make sure HA, DRS, and EVC is disabled on the target side, at least for the process of migration. You can enable it later on. Then it's time to pull the trigger. Do or do not. There is no try. And it's true. There's no going back. If you start, you have to succeed. There's no way back. Now we disabled the cluster member list updates, so we could potentially disconnect one host, remove it from inventory, and reconnect it to the other host, and the cluster will remain intact. This is our vSAN cluster, and they will keep on communicating with each other, although one of the hosts is in a distant vCenter. It's crazy, but it works. But wait a minute, what about VDS? Standard switches are a host property. They move with the host. A VDS is a vCenter property. So if we leave vCenter, we leave the VDS. How are we supposed to communicate? The magic is that for each VDS, there's a hidden local standard switch you cannot see on each host. And for each distributed port group, there is a hidden standard port group on each host. And that's why the host will keep communicating with the rest of the cluster hosts, although he has left the VDS. It looks crazy because you see a host with no networking and it's still communicating. The cluster is intact. Black magic. Now here's the procedure how you do it. Take the first host, disconnect it from vCenter, remove it from inventory, and move it to the target cluster. And now this is an important step. Do not import it into the new vSAN cluster. What will happen if we import it into the new vSAN cluster? Any ideas? It will enter maintenance mode. We don't want maintenance mode. We want the VMs up and running. So we have to import it outside the cluster as a standalone host. And nothing will happen. The VMs will keep on running. In a second step, you may drag and drop it into the vSAN cluster. It will not enter maintenance mode. But this extra step is crucial. If you make it wrong, you will have a bad surprise. Then check connectivity. Do it on the command line. Check the connectivity to all remaining hosts of the vSAN cluster. You'll be surprised, it's all good. Then it's time to join the new host, not a new host, but to join the host to the new VDS on the target side. So import the kernel ports and join to the VDS you've created. Check again connectivity. You will see the cluster is still intact. Once you check that, resume with the second host. Repeat the procedure until you have migrated all hosts to the target site. And finally, don't forget, this is really important, disable the advanced setting, because in future you want vCenter to notify hosts about changes in the cluster. So that's the final stage. We activated cluster member list updates again. So that's the standard, that's the basic. We have all hosts in the target vCenter. You don't need to be on the same version. You can go to a higher version. So we went from 6.7 to vCenter 7. That's not a problem. That's no issue. Because our hosts are still on 6.7, but so what? We can update them later. Once you finish that, wipe away your sweat. Trust me, me and my customer, we had wet hands and cold sweat on our backs. After we finished, what was like, oof, yeah, it went wrong. It went good. Yeah, what have we learned? You need to do a precise list, like a checklist in a cockpit about your steps. You need to follow. First step, second step, write it down, follow your list, make check marks. Okay, done, done, done. In this case, you wouldn't forget something or do an extra step that is not necessary. Be prepared for the unexpected. Always have a plan B, C, or even an unpleasant plan D. And finally, if your plan D is working well, you have something to talk about. You can come to Barcelona, get on stage at VMware Code and tell the story. And that's the good thing about it. So that was very condensed in 25 minutes. So if you want to see the whole story, here's the blog post. There's a short link, t1p.de/vSAN-MIG. So there's a detailed post about the whole procedure, and you can read it in full length and try it at home. Oh, that was too fast? Okay. If you have questions, you may come to me, ask me, and yeah, we can talk. We have a couple of minutes left, so if there's some Q&A, feel free.
How many nodes, how much storage?
Pardon?
How many nodes, how much storage? was involved in?
Not too much. So our first plan was to shut down and rebuild from backup. So we had a few terabytes. It wasn't too much. Yeah. The crucial thing was that we couldn't afford downtime. Yeah.
Huh? What about licensing? For the vCenter.
It was the old licensing. There was a question about licensing. It was in the old days when we had socket licenses. We didn't try this with the new VCF licenses, but it should be working because you have 60 days of trial, so shouldn't be a problem. Any more question? Yeah. I'll be here around. If you've got questions or remarks, please let me know. Thanks for your attention and enjoy the show.